limit your comments to 3 minutes. Any questions should be directed at the board, not to administrators or to other staff. Anyone who wishes to have a matter placed on the agenda for a board meeting, or to have materials distributed at a board meeting, or to raise questions that require more detailed answers or that are more sensitive than what we wish to be discussing in public, may also contact us via our board email. It's up to the board to determine what's appropriate to discuss and to distribute at its meetings. The first thing we have to think about is the agenda. We did have 3 additions to the agenda, and I would also like to make a motion to table the executive session until a later date when we can do it at a special meeting, because the principals are not here tonight and we need them to be able to give us reports for that meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have motions to approve the agenda as recommended? As amended, I'm sorry.
I'll move. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Can I have motions to approve the minutes of the November 17th, 2016 regular meeting?
I'll move. I had sent in a couple of small things.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion?
No, there's the written minutes, but there's also the video minutes that we talk about the same thing.
No, I'm talking about the
Okay,
written minutes.
just the-
It's just the written part, rather than board docs. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Okay, we have the consent agenda, which we can do as one motion, and that runs through old business consent agenda. There are a couple of items that I would like to read before I ask for motions. The first one is because Paul Lehman was not at our last board meeting, and it was Board of Education week, and we got recognized, we would like to recognize Paul and thank him for his service.
Excuse me. If I may, just,
It's really cool. Okay.
We were all a little strangely excited.
take everyone out of the,
Okay, as a former coach, it's cool, but I don't know, very cool would have gone.
Oh,
That way.
I mean, we were jumping up and down excited.
Okay, well, that's cool. Thank you.
I'll take it if you don't mind.
I didn't say that.
All right.
I said
Does
it's
it
at
have
a
the
very
fashion
cool
sense
level.
that we did? Okay, go ahead.
and I just wanted to say that serving on the Board of Education is a volunteer position. It is sometimes considered thankless work, but let me assure you that if everything rises and falls on leadership, the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools is very important in terms of what gets done in a learning organization. So thank you for your service, and glad that you're here to receive your gift.
Thank you. The other 2 items under old business are, we have a second read of a policy that doesn't have to be no action on that tonight. And may I have motions to approve Victoria Carney and Susan Peach as yearbook advisors for the 2016-17 school year, as per memorandum of agreement between the HTA president and the superintendent. Any discussion? All in favor? That brings us to our first opportunity for the general public to speak to the board. So if you have something to say, come on up. Okay. At this time, nobody is coming forward. So we have a teacher presentation. Renee Merck and Jess Poyer will give an overview of their summer curriculum project. And you guys might want to turn that around for your presentation so you can talk to the audience.
Oh. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jessica Poyer. I teach 3rd grade here at HCS, and I'm Renee Merck, teach 3rd grade with Jess. And so this summer, Jess and I worked together to create a toolkit for one of our units of study and reading workshop. And the idea came about from a visit from the Teachers College staff developer named Simone Frazier, and she suggested developing a system which she referred to as a toolkit for teachers to carry with them when they were conferring and when they were doing small group strategy work. And so the purpose of the toolkit is to foster efficiency and provide the teacher with necessary pieces at their fingertips to run an effective strategy group. So a little background about the units of study and workshop model are that each unit of study is designed in sessions or daily lessons. So each session is broken into 3 parts: the mini lesson, the independent practice, which is also piggybacked with some conferring with students, and finally the group share. And so students read independently, and when they do that at their own just right levels, teachers confer with them, but also they run these small strategy groups. And so the strategy group is meant to be quick with some quick strategies, modeling, student practice, and then an opportunity to go off and try it on their own, and then we would check in again with them. And so we are interested in creating this toolkit system to make that as efficient as possible and have the tools at our fingertips and make it really quick to grab and use with students right away. And so our project is pretty lofty. It was more work than we thought it would be to learn the entire unit of study and then go through it little by little with the strategy groups in mind and think about how to pull all of that together with anchor charts and exemplars, with student-leveled books, and then to think about developing the concise language we would need for each one of the lessons throughout the entire unit of study. So our final product was super worth the time. So this is like a piece of gold because it's carried with us as we are working with students, and it has each lesson broken down into pieces so that we can just pull the anchor charts and exemplars and pieces that we need for students to work with them in strategy groups really quickly. And so the next steps are...
So, yeah, as Renee mentioned, our lessons are very multifaceted. If I could just give you a window into, teaching elementary school, it's extremely busy. It's like you're juggling and you have lots of balls in the air at any one time. And we're planning for reading instruction, differentiated writing instruction, math instruction, word study. So there's a lot of balls that we have up in the air at any given time. And so having the time over the summer was crucial to be able to do this planning and preparation so that we went right into Unit 1, very organized and ready to go. Renee and I are both new to third grade. I was a first grade teacher this year. So again, this was, it was really coveted time for us to be able to do that. So actually what it ended up looking in terms of a final project is, you can see that we took the lessons and looked at the strategy group suggestions, and we had to type them out and made little charts for the kids. And in this toolkit, we also have books with sticky notes for mentor text that we can use with the kids. Lots of goodies in here, sticky notes, because you can never have enough. And then what's really important too in our 3 through 5 curriculum are the reading learning progressions. So our toolkits also include these. So at any given time, we're working with kids, conferring with them in these groups and one-on-one, and we're able to say, kids, this is the expectation for this right now. Look and see what you can do as a 3rd grader, what you can do as a 4th grader, so it makes it very differentiated. So in terms of our next steps, I think Mrs. Merck and I would love to be able to have this opportunity next summer to continue building more toolkits with more of the units. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to do this work over the summer. It really helped us feel ready in September.
Thank you so much. We had a presentation about the labor relations operation, and policy services that we're subscribing to.
Hello, everybody. We have short time because I know everybody has places to go, particularly before it snows. So I'm George Mead from the Madison United BOCES Labor Relations Office. I'm an attorney that works there. This is Jennifer Russ. She's our policy specialist and coordinator. Is that what you call it?
Sure. Policy and benefits coordinator.
She's like gold. She can be whatever she wants to call her, I'll tell you. I've been asked to talk to you a little bit tonight about policy, and in particular the board's role in supporting with policy. You have this, I believe, in front of you. I need to see it to pay attention to what I'm talking about, but if you have any questions or if I'm going too fast, stop me and ask me, okay? First of all, I've got to point this the right way.
Not working.
Is it?
There it goes.
Here, you want me to do it?
You can try it.
It was going.
Is it on?
It's on.
Forward and backward, is it on?
Yep, it's on. Can you do it on that? Can I do it over there?
It's going on here.
You could speak.
Oh, it's moving it, yeah.
It's moving on here.
Well,
Well, maybe. This should be, this should be an easy quiz.
I have a printout.
yeah, okay. And I apologize to the members in the audience. If we can get this going, we will. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the authority of the board, first of all. And the board's role and how policy works with the board. First slide, what's the source of the board's authority? And one of the first places you can look is one of your own policies, which sets out where authority flows from. It starts out with a constitutional mandate to provide education, which is carried out by the legislature that had, first of all, created schools, school districts, and BOCES, and has changed how they're compiled and how they're joined together and everything over a long history of education in New York. It empowers and limits what the school district can do, and it creates, defines, empowers, and limits the actions of the main players, which are the Board of Trustees, you folks, the superintendent, and the other school officers and employees. The descriptions of the authority for everybody involved in a school district is found in the statutes, the regulations, and guidance provided by the state to cover those. One of the most important things you need to understand is you act as a corporate body. Okay, that means you can only act together. It's created as a body corporate, and all property that you hold is vested in that corporate body. So nobody has individual rights to anything. You have to act together. The only authority you have to act is as a full board, and you have a part to play in that, of course. All your decisions are made as one body. You can only act within the limits set out in the laws, which is contrary to a private corporation, because a private corporation is actually an alter ego for a person, and they can do anything a person can do. And their directors can act individually at certain times, and their officers can. You cannot. Your authority must be exercised as a whole body, made by a majority vote. Another part of your job is you're given the specific authority and duty to operate the district to provide an education to your residents. That's your mission. That's your job. Essentially, you're a board of trustees, and as part of that, you hold the property, you manage the property, you take care of the property, you provide the direction for the school, you provide what you're going to use and how you're going to deliver it to the students, and you have oversight of the staff and administrators who do that job for you. First and foremost is this gentleman sitting right here. You set governing goals, standards, directions, and budgets. You're the keeper of the purse, if you will. And it's often done by setting the policies in place. Think of it as a ship. You set the direction. The other people set the sails and let it get there. Okay? Or a train. You decide what cities the train's going to go to. You buy the tracks. You buy the engines. You employ the engineer. You don't run the train, though. The engineer runs the train. Okay? You own the tracks. To buy the tracks, you may have to have permission from somebody else, like your voters. But that's the closest analogy I can bring to the roles you play. Your specific actions are governed by the authority you're given, and there's all of that set out in law. Most notably, the section that applies to you is in the education law. And I'm not going to go through them all, but there's a whole list of duties there in slides 6 and 7, I think. For certain things like adopting your bylaws and rules for conducting your own business, recruiting, selecting and hiring a superintendent, establishing rules and regulations for discipline in the school, and that's both students and employees. Many of those rules, however, though, are limited by what the law says you have to do. You can prescribe the course of study, textbooks. Of course, State Ed has a say in that as well. You can buy land for schools. You can buy, equip, furnish fuel, all the things you need to do to keep those schools running. You can create certain limited reserves to help against liabilities and expenses. You employ teachers, administrators, librarians, folks to actually make it happen. You fill vacancies on your board when they occur. You can have a cafeteria. But one of the limitations is you have to price food to equal the cost of obtaining and preparing the meals minus any reimbursements you may have. Okay, grants, federal aid, whatever it is. So you can have a function like that, but it tells you how you have to run it and how you have to pay for it. You can purchase and maintain motor vehicles. The most important, one of the functions you have to do is provide water closets for the school. Did you know that? That's kind of an important function. I want you to listen to this very carefully. We'll go through this very quickly. Can you skip ahead a few? Yeah, see, I had all those really neat, that's, been through that. Right there. This slide is very important. Education Law 1709 sets out all your powers and authorities. And one in particular says, you're generally responsible for the superintendent's management and control of the educational affairs of the district. That's your main mission, okay? It says, so you will have all the powers reasonably necessary to exercise those powers and discharge those duties which are imposed expressly or by implication by this chapter or other statutes. So your powers are limited to exactly and only what you are allowed to do by a statute or law, and interpretations of those and regulations of the commissioner. Now that's important to understand because at first when you start to read that, it sounds like a very broad authority. It's not. It's strictly limited to what you are told you can and are supposed to do, plain and simple. Necessary powers means, for example, if you have the authority to enter into contracts as a board, you have the authority to sign them. You have the authority to enforce them. You have the authority to sue somebody who doesn't follow the contract you have with them. Those are necessary and attendant powers. But all of those powers have to be exercised by you collectively as a board. Okay? Somebody doesn't deliver the widgets that you bought from them, school books, whatever, and you want to sue them. One of you can't go out and sue them. The superintendent can't go out and sue them. But you as a board can decide to sue them to collect on that contract. Okay? That's what those attendant and necessary powers are, so you understand. It's still a very limited scope. It's just intended not to hamstring you in doing those things you have to do. Make sense? Some of the other things you have are powers that are shared with others. That means either they're subject to voter approval, and I'm sure you know what some of those are, or they're subject to commissioner approval. For example, any addition you want to do to a school, that has to be submitted for commissioner's approval of all the plans and everything before you can do it. Financing has to be approved as well. School board member's job. Although you're elected, the similarity with other elected officials ends right there. Why? Because you're not elected to advocate. You're elected as a trustee to do a job in running the school. So, you're not supposed to advocate for the community or its residents generally. That's not to say you don't have an opinion about how things should be done, okay, or how money should be spent or things like that. But you don't advocate on behalf of the group. You bring your own expertise to the table. You also specifically are not allowed to represent individuals or groups before either this board or the administration of the school, and you can get in a lot of trouble for doing that. So as much as you may want to take up somebody's cause, you shouldn't do that. And there's a very practical reason for that, because later on, given the process that kind of complaint or problem is supposed to go through, you may be sitting here as a judge in the end on an appeal. And if you've gotten involved before that, you obviously are not an impartial judge. If it creates enough of a conflict, you can't hear the matter, and then the board may not be able to decide if it's short of quorum. Okay, so there are very practical reasons why you're governed by those principles. Your specific job is to work with the board members to collectively make the decisions necessary to govern the school district in the manner authorized and required by law. Very simple. You have no authority to act independently. You have no authority to direct employees to do anything. You have only the rights that any other qualified voter of the district has, and that includes rights to records. Although you may be provided other records and information that the public generally does not get to take part in some of the deliberations or perform some of the functions you have, okay, especially like personnel matters and things like that. That doesn't mean you have the right to go in and generally move around in personnel records or anything You should remain out of the day-to-day affairs for the reasons we've already discussed. You're not an investigator, you're not a hearing officer, you're not a grievance officer. You should not help others gain access to administration for the reasons we discussed. You should follow the chain of command. There's a very definite chain of command. Probably, although you may not realize it, if you look at your policies, you've set that chain of command up already. And you do have a duty to attend board meetings, to participate in the board's decision-making process, to deliberate with your fellow board members, and to vote on matters before the board. There are a few limited exceptions where a board member may be able to act individually, and that is only where the law says you have to. For example, when the president has to sign certain bond documents, or where the board delegates to you. One of the things that happens sometimes is the president by law is supposed to sign all contracts for the district. But sometimes that's not practical, so when the board approves a contract, they can authorize the superintendent or somebody else to sign that contract, but they're still signing on behalf of you, and that's the only thing they can do. No individual can enter into a contract for the district. That's very important to understand that. Now, policy.
Policy, the
The
most
expert.
important job, right? The board sets policy, and we try to say it's the most important duty of the board. So, you're familiar with your policies, you probably have about 300 or so policies. Probably 35 to 40 are actually legally mandated to have in your policy manual, but it's good practice and to have policies that are particular to your district. So a board policy is a statement that establishes the standards or objectives to be attained by the district. It sets standards of conduct that may be used by the courts to measure district conduct or possibly improves liability. So if you have a policy, you have to make sure you're following it. If you're not following it and something happens, you could get sued in court over it. Board policies have authority within the education system, similar to a local law. And they should only be adopted with a clear understanding of how it will be implemented. And I stress implemented because if the students, staff, public do not know your policies, they don't know how to follow them, and they will not be followed through. So the purpose is of policies to orient new board members, inform the public of what to expect, again, comply with legal mandates, inform staff and students of what is expected, and to guide your daily operations. An effective board policy should reflect educational goals of the district to be adopted through proper board procedure, which you have a policy 2050 that specifies how your policies are adopted. And with that policy, you have 2 reads by the board. And just so you know that legally you can have one and waive the second. It's not written in your policy, but you can always go through and we can adjust that if needed. Respect legal and constitutional rights and requirements, and be communicated to persons it will affect, and be implemented. I say implemented a lot because if they don't know, how do you follow the policy? The origins of policy, where do they come from? Some are required, like I said, your code of conduct, your DASA, your equal opportunity non-discrimination, wellness, child abuse. Some are best practice, workplace harassment, transportation, comptroller recommendations. A lot of times we'll get calls from the district that their auditors recommend a policy. It's not required as a board policy, but it's a good practice to have in place.
That's
Sometimes-
especially true with financial things. You have a
Yes.
lot of recommendations from the controller, and they say it should be policy. Well, that's so I can guide your employees.
And we always say the policy, the capital P or the small p. Is it a board policy or is it just a policy procedure that you have in place? Because remember, once you bring a policy to the board and it's been acted on, it cannot be changed unless the board makes that change. And some are district specific. For example, you have policy 7106, band instruments. Not all districts have that policy, but some do. We have 38 policy districts / BOCES in our service. So if you're looking to update maybe your band instruments, I know that not many have them, but we do have some policies in our districts that do have the band instruments, and you can call and I can give you samples of what other districts are doing, or you're thinking of developing a new policy, not sure where to start, you can call and I can help you through that process. The board's role, again, it's in your 2050. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's in your policy, it's just taken from there. But the third bullet, the adoption of a written policy shall occur only after the proposal has been moved discussed and voted on. That's where I said about the 2 meetings, we can adjust that if needed. And also, you do have in your policy about superintendent regulations. Superintendent regulations do not need to be presented to the board for adoption. Once they are, it's pretty much considered policy. So I'm talking about forms, FMLA forms, procedures that would follow the policy. And in your manual, there'll be like the 2050, and then point 1 might be a procedure and be a superintendent's regulation. And the school board policy requires constant review and revision in response to changing state and federal laws. We, as an office, send out updates, any updated federal laws, regulations, court cases, things in the community, things that are happening. Our recent one was a concussion management policy. It was revised because we had many districts that didn't want to just specify athletics, but anything, activities in the school or the classroom. So we did a revision and we sent an update, and that will explain why we did it. It gives you options of what you want in your policy. If you decide that, you call our office, and we implement that language into your policy and send you a draft to look at. Again, implementation, it's expected the standards of conduct, of course, frequently uphold liability. And again, if the students and staff and public don't know, like your code of conduct, how can they follow it? Some policies must be reviewed by the board annually. So your code of conduct has to be reviewed annually, and your investments policy, and there's quite a few. They can be, do you have a policy committee or as a whole?
Well,
So what we would suggest that would make it easier for the board is quite a few times the policy committee would review those policies that have to be reviewed annually. And if you don't have any revisions, you bring it to the board and say we review them. We accept them, and they can be done at your reorg meeting or anytime. You can do it now at this meeting if you wanted
I
to.
think we have a schedule,
But
and they
yes,
only have
as
to
long
be
as
read
you-
once, so.
Yeah, so you don't have to
Right,
bring
we-
them and read them twice,
We have a
and
schedule that starts in January.
then you can come and say it's been done. It just makes the process go easier. Your board policy manual again, it is, you have a superintendent's reg, like I was saying, about 2050.
Can I ask a question about superintendent's regs?
Yes.
It was my understanding that they don't have to have the first and second read, and that they are made by the superintendent, perhaps working with the board or
Correct,
alone, but I thought they had to be adopted by the board.
No, once anything's adopted by the board, it's pretty much
Okay.
considered a policy. We have districts that do it different. We have a few districts, sometimes they always adopt everything, but it just makes your life, it takes 2 months to get a policy passed. Sometimes your Department of Education, your Department of Labor forms, they change. And if it's a simple form that's in your policy to have 2 reads, it's really not necessary if the superintendent can just approve it. And not that, he would tell you when you bring it up and what's been changed. It's mainly procedures, forms, field trip requests. I see that a lot. That
We've
might
been
be-
through a couple, and we thought we had to do board approval.
If it's been board approved, what I would recommend is you rescind it
Okay.
and then make that a superintendent's reg,
Okay.
because nothing can be changed unless the board does, if it's been adopted.
A good example is your records policy or access to records or your FOIL
That was the
policy.
one, that was the one.
Okay.
We
You know,
adopted.
you say
And
that
it's completely driven by law. It's almost a
Right.
restatement of ed law.
Exactly, so-
I'm not sure we should rescind it. Maybe we'll just let it.
But you don't have to repeat the whole law. And the trick we often use is you say, all requests for records will be submitted in accordance with FOIL and or FERPA, okay? Because the law can change, and then you don't have to change your whole policy every time the law changes. And then the superintendent will develop by regulation forms.
And I think we did that, we just did that with the policy.
Mhm.
The policy was just
So-
done in October,
Mhm.
and we changed the policy, and the reg is, I think, still in draft, deciding what they're doing.
No, the reg was on last month's agenda.
Okay, it was on last
So-
month's
so-
agenda, okay. I remember the policy.
So that way, if the law changes and requires something else to be in the application, or if you notify of a different time for an appeal, you can just change the form without having to go through the whole process.
So I included, and I don't know if all of you have that 3-ring binder that's about this thick. What's easier now is we put them online for you, and we maintain the website for you. So the new policy that was adopted in October will be at this link, and it's already, I think, on your webpage. and it's searchable. So if you go there, you can put in FMLA, and your FMLA policies will come up, or whatever you're looking for. Smoking, it's just a very easy assessment, and we maintain that for you. So also, as I had mentioned earlier, we prepare template policies on core subjects that could be covered in a policy manual, and we send out updates. But we also have, like I said, if you're looking for a particular policy, like you have a 1016 public complaints policy, that's a typical policy. That's like a template we have, and it has the typical language in it, and that would be something that we would just send out or keep you updated on. We continually monitor changes in statutes and regulations, court decisions. Like I mentioned, the recent concussion policy update that we just sent out. We sent out a district-wide safety policy that we recommended revisions to. They now included emergency and fire drills, not just fire drills. So that changed your policy.
One of the other things that have happened recently, as a result of changes in custom or things happening in the community, were e-cigarettes. And in most policies, they were not included in the definition of tobacco that drove the whole policy. So we had to figure out, first of all, was it a cigarette, was it tobacco, or was it a drug delivery system? Because those are two different policies that have to handle that. Some schools chose to treat it as a drug delivery system because you can use other things besides nicotine in them.
Well, we
Some
changed our
schools chose
policies.
to,
We changed our smoking policies to tobacco policies.
So it's included in the definition of
Tobacco-free-
tobacco apparatus.
Tobacco-free nicotine policies instead of just saying smoking. And we had changed that also because you can only so many feet from the school and the e-cigarettes and the vaping, and we had many different, but your code of conduct will list certain things too. And it's hard because if you change one policy, that's another thing. We try to stay consistent with, if you're gonna have a no tobacco-free policy, nicotine policy, make sure it's consistent with your code of conduct. We try to also, so you don't have, a good one is your sexual harassment policy. A lot of times we'll have, where is it for sexual harassment for students, sexual harassment for adults. So we kind of combine those to your non-discrimination, equal opportunity policy, and everything's in one. So it was easier to find than one in the student section and one in the personnel section.
I have another question about something specific you're talking about. We just got word from NISBA that we should look back at our attendance policies and make sure that they are not violating laws that pertain to homeless students.
Yes.
So
yes.
are you guys are looking at that now?
We have that, and with the
Foster families,
the
yes.
foster students and transportation, we're looking into that, so you'll find updates from
Okay.
us shortly on all that. Any other questions?
Questions for the board? I have a clarifying question. If the board policies are the kind of rules of the district, what, in your experience, is the best way to make sure that the employees understand the policy? As a superintendent, it's one of the first things you do is start reading the board policy, and that's almost instinctive.
Right.
But what systems or processes do other districts do to kind of make sure that the faculty are aware of policies? Because ultimately, they have to follow them also.
Correct. So I know, at the BOCES, I mean, it's our house, but I know when we have a policy change, a lot of times I will go to the director's meeting and explain to them what has been changed, and then they will go to their employees, we'll work with them, their principals, and let them know, and it's kind of like a trickle effect. So whatever affects them, that's how they trickle it down.
The first thing is the best, and it's on the web. So you can always say, first thing you do is go read the policy.
Right,
Okay. And then when you start reading it and thinking about how things have been done, it makes it a little bit easier to understand. But if you have specific questions, they should be addressed to the administrators, okay? Principal first, whatever the chain of command is, okay? And board members, I found lots of times, board members don't know what all their policies are. They're familiar with the ones that are brought in front of them every year to review, but they never get to read the other ones unless something happens, and sometimes then it's too late. So the policies, the way they should be written, are not long, detailed documents. They shouldn't be. So it shouldn't be that difficult to refer to them. And we all have a table of contents in there, so it's relatively, and it's searchable, so it's relatively easy to find things. But the first thing I would do is say, refer them to the basic policies online, and then we make efforts to make sure the updates are brought to their attention. Okay, thank you.
We have had people in the building, I think teachers and administrators, ask us to review policies too,
Well,
and
they're
that
specific
has
to
been
how-
really good. I mean, it's
And
opened
they're
up
probably
some
specific to
communication.
what they're doing.
That's right.
You have to be careful of that. There's an old adage in the legal business: good facts can make bad laws. So if someone brings up they want to change because of a specific situation, policies are not intended to deal with a specific
It hasn't been
situation.
that.
They're supposed
No,
to
it hasn't
govern
been
all
that.
situations.
Things
So
like-
you have to be very
yeah.
careful and think out the ramifications of any
Yeah.
changes. That's why it takes us so long to do these updates sometimes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, that brings us to new business, and we have a couple of things under personnel. May I have motions to approve Ryan Bain as a part-time .5 FTE art teacher, effective December 12th, 2016 through June 30th, 2017, at step 1 of the salary schedule, as recommended by the secondary principal and the superintendent.
I'll move.
Any discussion? All in favor? I have motions to approve Dallas Polinsky to the substitute list as recommended by the elementary principal and the superintendent.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have motions to approve Colleen Law Teff as a volunteer for the spring musical as recommended by the master's director and the superintendent? Any discussion? All in favor? And may I have motions to approve the recommendations of the committees on special education and preschool special education?
Second.
Any discussion would come in our special meeting, so all in favor?
When is the special meeting?
We haven't set the date yet, we just called for one. And we, under new business, have a special education report review. And that's gonna be done by Fred and Dr. Alston.
Is that facing you or is it facing as it is?
I don't know.
We can leave it as it is. We can leave it as it is.
Is there gonna be a
No.
PowerPoint?
No.
Okay.
No. Really, this is a two-part presentation. One provides backstory and context and a little bit of the financial structure. And then Mr. Brigham will take care of the report itself. As many people know, I started in the summer of 2015, and over the course of that summer, I was made aware that there was no RTI, response to intervention, screener for mathematics within our K-12 system. Further along in early fall, one of my contacts informed me that we were due for a special education audit from the New York State Education Department, but it was held off because we have a new superintendent. And while they're not always as sensitive as we'd like them to be, they were sensitive and generally don't want to audit new superintendents. Additionally, as I have been working through the system early in my tenure here, I did notice teachers within the department were giving everything they had and would go the extra mile, but something wasn't sitting right with me in terms of a K-12 system. And the background of that is, for my last 3 years as principal, every CSC, Committee of Special Education meeting, in my building, I had the senior law partner at the CSE meeting. So, because it was a very litigious environment, people with money tend to bring lawyers with them. So we always had our top attorney with us. And so that's how I kind of got a good sense of it. Prior to that, 7 years prior to my last 3 years as principal, the principal, me, was in charge of all 504s. So, meaning the 504 modifications that we would give students. And that's an 800-person building, roughly. So at some point, we get designated a focus district. around March, we issue a survey to the faculty regarding 4 pretty basic questions. How confident are you that you follow the law regarding IEPs in class? And the 4 questions are options are very confident, willing to put the house on it. Capable and confident, I do it every day and would pass an external review. Not very confident, I probably need a refresher. And 4, get me training and support as soon as possible. The next question was, how confident are you that you follow 504s in your class? And the very same 4th scale. Very confident, capable, not very confident, get me training. The last part was very telling, a yes or no. I'm clear and have a copy of the special education evaluation referral process. I'm clear on it and I have a copy of it. Yes or no? The next question, I'm clear and have a copy of the 504 referral process. Yes or no? That data gave me a lot of information in terms of where we were as a system, K through 12. When we received the focus designation, we were eligible to apply for and advocate for a $25,000 grant. And that grant is very focused and limited in terms of what you can do with the money. And what you can do with the money is identify challenges. Now, to back up, focus district designation says that our lower economic children, students with less economic means, are not achieving at the rate that they should be. So we worked, Kevin and I went, Mr. Ellis and I went to Albany, did a lot of work. We actually sat down with the assistant commissioner and really tried to explain the context, because we wanted to get out of the focus designation, but when that wasn't going to happen and we realized that there was some money involved, we saw that this was an opportunity. However, that money had to be used to identify your issues. Like, why are your students where they are, your economically challenged students? So at that point, we had brought in Dr. Brown from CREC. CREC, I was introduced to that organization at a New York State superintendent's training in either Albany or Saratoga. And they had done a presentation for about 30 new superintendents, and Dr. Brown did that, which means, and came highly recommended. So she came in and did some professional development, and part of the focus designation, we used part of that money for her to come in and do this special education review. Initially, and this is where the finances come in, initially we priced it, and her price was $18,000 for the report that you have. And I just knew, and she gave me the districts that she worked for, some in Long Island, all across the state, but I knew that was not going to work. And I told her, no thank you, we just can't do it. So I asked Mr. Bragan, who had been a director of PPS prior to being a superintendent, a lot of special education background, to sit down with me and you draft a review of our special education. And he came close to about $8,000. And on another related matter, I was dealing with one of our attorneys. He said, he shouldn't do it. I said, why? He's qualified. I said, he's an employee of the district. You don't want an employee of the district to do your review. Fine. I go back to Dr. Brown and I say, let's see if we could work something out. And we downscaled it, the scope of the project, and she agreed. And then we started doing the work, and she said, you know what? I'll give you the full package. I'll give you the $18,000 package if you're willing to wait for the report while I write the report for the people who are paying full price. I said, well, that's good, but we need to get running immediately. She said, well, the good news is I'll give you the information you need to get started running in September. So since September, we've been doing some work, and that's where I'm going to transition to Fred Bragan to kind of walk through where we're at. Okay? I'll take your seat.
Thanks, Dr. Elson. Evening, everyone. How are we doing? I think it was a good move. I think, and I've done things like this in my past of having a third party come look. Sometimes we're too close to the forest to see the trees. And I think it reinforced, having Dr. Brown come in and kind of do an audit, kind of an internal audit, reinforced some of the concerns that we had, that Dr. Alston had, that I had when I first came on board. And I think it added some areas of perspective, some value added things. When Dr. Brown came in, there were certain things and methodologies that she used. One was interviews, so there were interviews with faculty, staff, parents, students. There was a review of IEPs, so she took some samples, not all IEPs, but took some IEPs, looked at those IEPs in terms of how they're written, how the goals are written, program and service delivery. Reviewed plans and processes, so looked at our 504 plan, and what was the process that we used for that? Is it widely communicated? Do people know the process? Is it implemented with fidelity and consistently? She looked at state data. So kind of, as we can all go on and look at state data, and you can look at state data for every district in New York State. A caveat with state data, and when we look at the data in the CREC report, some of it, there's nothing. Hamilton, like many districts across New York State, had many opt-outs. So there wasn't enough number of students to do an analysis on. There was one area, our 8th grade, we had 86% of the students with disability score level 3. There were no students that got a level 4. Level 3 is good. Level 4 is the best. When we looked at some other districts, they had some students with disabilities scoring in level 4, and we had some kids in level 2. So those are questions districts always ask, like how do we get our 2s to 3s? How do we get our 3s to 4s? But I think it's also to put data in perspective. And as I look at this district, and as I did the special ed update at the end of last year, 100% graduation rate. Students with disabilities getting high school diplomas, Regents diplomas, and with their CDOS credential. We've done very well, and when you look at the exit, we're doing very well as a district. There's some things in the middle in terms of some plans and processes that we can improve upon, as any district can. Feedback I've received from faculty and staff, and people very much are looking forward to professional development, learning some new things, unpacking standards, as we look at writing standards-based IEPs. I think people are looking forward to knowing that we have a plan, we have a process, everyone knows that process, it's widely communicated, and it's communicated not only internally but externally, so all of our stakeholders know. And so as I looked at that review, I read it a few times, there's a lot of pages, but you find that certain things are repeated in different places. So I kind of looked at 4, maybe 5 things that I think stand out as priorities as we go forward now with the implementation. One, under the heading of, if you looked at educational benefit, underneath that heading, we know there are some things that we identified and were also identified in the audit. One is IEP development. Looking at standards-based IEP development. So as we're writing our IEPs, and as we look at IEPs, we have these present levels of performance. And it's a balance of what student strengths and their weaknesses. Those then should be a straight line to our goals and our program and services. And we have to make sure that students are being presented with Common Core standards and content. Goal writing is an area we need to look at in terms of, are goals measurable? Are they attainable? Are they timely? In other words, SMART goals. So as we look at some of our goal writing, there's some areas of improvement that we can do that. Specifically design instruction. And we've had this conversation before in terms of, for example, at the elementary level, we have Fontes and Pinnell, students are struggling in that, we have the LLI. And then the next step, when students really need intense intervention, we're looking at different programs that we don't have. The district used to have some programs that were more specific to those kids that were really struggling with like the coding and blending, your emerging readers, your beginning readers. We need to get back to that. If we look at other specialized instruction or assistive technology that can help so that kids really are accessing the standards at their grade level. And that's difficult. Some programs internally, when you have, I'm a teacher, I have 3 different grade levels in my classroom. And how do I get the standards for all those kids from 3 different grade levels and keep them going on their content? So I'll talk a little bit about professional development coming up that will address that. Plans and processes, the RTI plan and that process, we know there was a plan, and like many plans in many places, over the years, it's several years old, you have pieces of it in different places. We needed to bring that back together and do some revisions, and we're in that process. That's just about done. That'll be the RTI AIS plan. Then we have to make sure everyone has it, everyone knows it, our parents have it, it's on our website. So that communication, I think, while I didn't write that as an area, that's always an area of communicating what we're doing. Our CSE process, so that any person coming into this district knows, I'm a new teacher, new to the district, how does that process run? What can you hand me as part of my packet when I come here? For existing teachers, if there have been changes to those processes, they need to know that. And then the communication and teaching of all those things. And what do I mean by that is we have to let people know what the changes are. They have to get copies of it. Our parents need to know what our plans are, what it means for their children, and understand all the steps. And that doesn't, and I want to point out, that doesn't mean these things are non-existent. Okay? We've had these plans, we've had these processes. There's some areas we can improve them. So I want to make sure that you put any audit in perspective that the district has had these moments, but we can make some areas better. Progress monitoring and reporting, want to make sure that we have a consistent method and manner at different levels of how do we monitor students, how do we progress monitor, and how do we report. Whether that's reporting at an annual review or an update 504 meeting or an updated RTI meeting, so that we have data and keep records. One of the things that staff has shared with me is with our RTI process, a student might be in tier 2. Well, the school year ends. Next year, we have a new teacher. That teacher's not always aware that student's in RTI. So how do we make sure we're communicating that? So we're not starting over, because that's inefficient. And it's frustrating for teachers. Analyzing student needs and scheduling. There was a comment in the audit about, are we scheduling based on schedules? Or are we scheduling based on student needs? I think we have a little bit of both. I think as we look at our master schedule as a district, we have to look at it in terms of how do we meet the needs of all kids. One of the examples I can give is our SLC. It's kind of become 2 SLCs. So we have kids that are scheduled into SLC for RTI, but at the same time there are the kids in there that are there for different reasons. So now you got a lot of kids. So as we look going forward, how can we schedule that better? How can we separate and make that a better process? Small districts, it's tough, but I think as a team we need to look at our master schedule, and then as a team schedule our kids with disabilities based on their needs and how we can best match them to their courses. And then kind of the last thing, and we're already involved in that, is our strategic planning. When I first came on board, I talked about we really need to take that 3-year look at our special ed department, but now that we're doing strategic planning as a district, you don't want to do that in isolation. So Dr. A and I have talked about having a special education task force that's part of that strategic planning and has stakeholders. So we have some parents, teachers, high school student if appropriate, so that we're making sure that our special ed program is completely dovetailed into that strategic plan. The resources that go with it, and then our professional development committee aware of where we're headed, so our professional development is convergent and not divergent. If I go too fast, let me know, but I'm also aware of time. So what's already underway? And again, I want to repeat, since I've been here, there's a lot of good stuff happening. We have, some areas that we can improve. As we look at professional development, as we look at, some of the next steps, we don't want to do that mile wide, inch deep, shotgun approach to professional development. We want to do a mile deep and an inch wide. So we want to make sure that professional development that we're giving is targeting our needs. And then there's a process to keep that going. There's nothing worse than going to that one-day workshop and then you never hear about it again. Teachers are already scheduled, or special ed teachers are already scheduled to go through the standards-based IEP training. One of Dr. Brown's dates, we looked at dates and revised our dates for her to come back so she can support that training that teachers are going through. So she's going to come back one of the dates after all the teachers have gone through that training, so then she can either extend it or go deeper with it and support it for our teachers. Part of that is unpacking the standards, and how do we unpack those standards, especially for a teacher that has multiple grade levels, and pull out the salient pieces of our standards so that teacher can better meet the needs of the students for different grade levels at the same time. Part of this, we'd like to do some in-class coaching, and the last day that she's going to be here, it's a model I'm very familiar with. As a past consultant, we would do the training, the workshop, we would do some follow-up, and then we would do in-class coaching. So we could take a topic and take it that mile deep, because that's the model that really can change what's happening for student achievement, because it gives teachers an opportunity to practice, to feedback, and then get ongoing feedback on one topic or one strategy. She's also going to be coming back to do instructional strategies. We had that scheduled for the 7th, but she had to change that date so that she can sit and work with our teachers on effective instructional strategies, some ideas that she has, and work with them in that area. As I said, the RTI-AIS plan is in the final stages. We'll be doing some training on the RTI and CSC process and 504 process. We've set up special education department meetings. It's something the faculty told me that they wanted in the past and kind of didn't get off the ground, so we've gotten that off the ground. We're also developing professional development for our paraprofessionals. First session with them will be on the 19th of this month in terms of two topics that we want to look at. One, how do we help create independence with our students? So if I'm a paraprofessional working with a student, how do we wean away from that student so we're not creating dependence? And things like hurdle help. How do I help a student who's having difficulty? Well, I'll help you do number one, then you do number two on your own. So trying to give them some strategies to work with kids that they're working with. The other is conflict resolution. When kids are having difficulty, I'm a big lover of Geoffrey Colvin's work in terms of climbing the mountain. When I'm here, I'm workable. I have a trigger event. I'm starting to get upset. This is where I try and intervene with the student. Once I'm here, I'm not going to have a whole lot of conversation at that point, but when the student is coming back down and getting back in that calm. So how do we develop strategies to help people understand that cycle when students are upset or having a tough day? And of course the district is moving ahead with strategic planning. I think it was a smart idea to have that objective eye. you know, again, I think it validated some things. And I want to say, do we have really good things going on? We do. Do we have excellent faculty? They go above and beyond. They love working with kids. Yes, we do. They go out of their way, out of their way to make kids successful and to get them to that next level. Have our teachers had the kind of support, training, development to help us kind of meet the needs of kids on a K-12 system basis? I think that's an area of opportunity. I think that's a growth opportunity for us. So it was a lot in that report, but I think there, as you read it, you saw patterns. Those are kind of the patterns that I picked out. You couldn't take on everything in that all at once. We would overwhelm our staff and faculty. So I think those are kind of the big things to start with, and then develop a plan going out with that as part of our strategic plan. Good faculty, good staff, some areas to grow in, but also doing some good stuff as well. Questions, or back to you?
That's it, thank you, Frank.
We will have questions, so.
Well,
Go ahead.
you started, Dr. Olson, talking about the way you met this person. How much did we end up paying for this?
One or about $8,000.
Because I just want to say, reading through it, I think, just as we heard, I think the recommendations are probably on spot, and it's what I've been hearing from the first day. But I think from a financial responsibility as a board member, I just have to express and be certain to say that I was incredibly disappointed with the quality of this report. And I could go on forever, but we don't have time, so I'll just give you like my top 3 or 5. She says that she's going to use a matrix to determine her outcome, but 2/5 of the matrix isn't completed. 40% of the work that we're paying her to do, she didn't do. Now I understand she says there's reasons, okay, that the event was done, the report was done over the summer. Personally, I don't know why you can't do parent surveys in the summer. That doesn't require you to be here, but that's 40% of the work that didn't get done. They said they would meet with special ed teachers. I mean, at least 3 of the secondary teachers weren't met with. They said that their comparison group was East Greenbush, Hyde Park, Schodack, South Colony, and Union Springs. I have no idea on what criteria you could come up with those as comparing to us. If you just took the simplest, easiest one of size alone, we have 560-something students. East Greenbush has 5,000. Hyde Park, 3,500. Schodack, 931. South Colony, 4,800. Union Springs gets close, 849. I think the region too, Capital Region, that's fine, but what's the connection to here? And then even some of their findings, they say the findings in finding 3, they cite observations of classroom, which they say they didn't do. So it just seems to me that they mailed this report in. And again, I am not questioning the findings. I think, as we heard here, we should give the support, training, development that we can for our teachers. But frankly, I'd ask for a refund from them. I mean, they didn't do the work that they say they're going to do.
I'm wondering, can we get that survey done now? Can we get it done? I don't know why not. That seems like that would be an easy thing, and that might be a next step. That was kind of a red flag to me, the survey not being done. But I agree that we've been hearing the findings have been repeated over and over
Yep,
again.
we know that.
And a couple of them were kind of exciting to me. One is that it's clear that we need to take a look at our resources. We need to add some resources, and we need to redistribute others. And that's going to be a good thing, I think. And the other thing that some little thing, and this was like very teacherly, but in the report they talked about monitoring IEPs, and I feel like when I was a classroom teacher, I had tremendous support from the special ed department if I wanted to. I mean, I think Mike saved me, Kathy saved me when I had a reading question. That's all I had to do. But in terms of monitoring IEPs, I, as a classroom teacher, should have been doing that. And that's going to be exciting when that becomes system-wide. I think that's going to be a good thing. The other thing I saw in that section was an opportunity to define data, because when we look at these reports, all we see are testing data, and they talked about formative assessments and other ways we could define the data to prove that our kids are successful. So I thought that was exciting. But again, the methodology I would question too. Amanda?
I'm gonna do that.
Okay.
I'll get back to you.
Okay, about the
Alright.
survey. You know, so
Definitely.
why can't we?
Yeah, I'll send this over.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I have motions to approve the people that are listed on board docs as members to the strategic plan core team as recommended by the superintendent?
I'll second.
Okay.
I won't leave you hanging.
Do this fast. Okay, any discussion? Any discussion, yes.
I don't know, but if I was saying we really got a problem here, so.
Discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to information and correspondence. We have administrators' reports. The two principals aren't here this evening to answer questions. Do you have anything you want to ask or find out about in the future? And we have the superintendent's update.
Sure. I met with our state senator Valesky last week. We spent several hours together, and he did a tour of the entire campus. Very impressed. But we also talked about the financial landscape from Albany's perspective, and there are two things that we have our eyes on. One, that Wall Street is not doing as well as projected, which means less money coming up to Albany. And the other thing is the wild card in terms of what the president will do with regard to Obamacare or the Affordable Health Care Act. He indicated that New York State is very well invested in the Affordable Health Care Act, and any dramatic change really shifts the pot of money in New York State. So those were just two surface issues. It's nothing he's concerned about. We did spend time on the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant, and he is going to work with me as a partner in trying to help us in any way he can. We'll be following up on that as well. So that's a very important piece, and very impressed, of course, when he came through the building, and it's always good to have the support of our.
Did he get to meet kids?
He did meet. Yeah, he spoke in addition to elementary classrooms. He spoke with kids in Miss Bossard's classroom, and it was a very good day. In other news, we were recognized by Niche.com, top 100 district in New York State, one of 5 in central New York. So as much as we have challenges, we also have the job getting done for kids, which is what this is all about. So that's nice. I did attend for part of the day yesterday. Mr. Raines took some students over to Madison Oneida BOCES for Chasing Greatness Youth Success Summit, and I actually gave the keynote speech, and just great to have youngsters at the high school level. And so that's my report, and we're happy about that.
Okay, we don't have our secondary person or our HISP board member, but we do have our elementary steering team person here. Did you guys meet?
We've met once since the last meeting.
Okay.
We've talked mainly focused on the school. Sorry. We talked about communication. We're going to work on services there. We also talked about the parent-teacher conferences. There's a couple things that we'd like to work on with that piece, and Kevin was supposed to send some stuff around to the teachers about being able to send something home to the parents first with a questionnaire, basically saying, is there anything that you want to cover as well, to give the teachers the opportunity to prep for that, since the meetings are short, to make sure that both parties had the ability to talk and be prepared for their pieces. So we're going with that not happening for the first round of teacher conferences, we're going to give it a try for this next round and see how that works for all parties. That was a big piece that we talked about yesterday.
And Dr. Alston can give that HSB.
Sure. Where we are with the HIS update is at our last meeting, we had the presentations from individuals who identified potential problems and potential solutions. At the next meeting, there were 4 people left over who didn't get a chance to present, and they will present. And at the next meeting, Mr. Arquette and Ms. Sunderman will frame out the categories. It really comes down to about 4 categories, maybe one more that everything fits under, and then we're going to assign subcommittees to do the work. And that's where we are with the HIS update. We probably, Riley will do the video update. So we look forward to Riley getting behind the camera.
How about a strategic plan update?
Sure.
That would be you.
The strategic plan update, the faculty and staff have taken the school performance scan, I think on December 5th. Mr. Raines is working as our internal facilitator, and what he is working on is getting focus groups to be interviewed, because part of that mixed method study is survey and interview. Tonight or tomorrow, the family/community engagement survey will be live and on the web. There is a video promotion that I did a brief introduction, but Carly Belanger is going to promote the community engagement survey. That is different than the faculty one. The faculty one did it all in one day. Community survey is different in that you go online and you put in the password, which is right under it, and you simply enter in your data, and that's going to stay open till about either the 22nd or the 30th, whichever, of December. So that needs to be open for a longer window, and there'll be updates as we go along. So for example, there is a possibility that there might be a snow day, and so if there is, just based on the weather forecast, so if we have to call in a snow day, I'll also use the back end of that message to say, by the way, the family engagement survey is up and on the web.
Could we put it on Nextdoor Hamilton, just so people are aware that it's up on, and they would have a reason to come to the website if they otherwise wouldn't? I didn't. I'll do it.
Yeah, okay, I'll send you that as well. Okay.
We'll talk about it. We'll collaborate, so I get it.
Yep.
But I'll do that, yeah.
That is the strategic plan update.
And then the last thing we have on the formal agenda is the broadband telecommunications services.
Okay. It's Ms. Lobster, but I'll set the table for her. So I took it off the agenda so that until we're clear on whether or not we want to allow any new items on the agenda for action. However, our broadband contract was renewed in 2013. I'm looking for my particular paper. However,
This one?
no.
That's the new one.
Yep, I have some special paper. And that expired, and while we were looking at different options, Ms. Lobster is going to get into the technical aspect. What we have in place in terms of broadband, while the contract was renewed in 2013, what we found out from Rick is it's from 2004. So the amount of bandwidth that we have in our system, and I think the analogy I used with the plumbing, and she's going to take over in a minute, is from 2004. And so the contract ran out, and we have been taking a close look at our infrastructure, and the opportunity now is to upgrade it. And you know, I had a couple of conversations with members of the board, and whether we do it this month or next month, the difference is a month. So we could have had it up and running in January, and it would add some benefit. But probably better that we just have a discussion until we're clear on whether or not we want to allow anything new to the agenda after it goes live. Ms. Lobster?
So, a little nervous tonight, but if you don't mind, I'm going to read something that came from the experts at the RIC regarding this situation. This is from our educational technology planner, Marie Haddad, and we were just looking for some information about currently what we have in place and what this upgrade might mean for us. So here's her email. The district's daily processes currently utilize 90% of our 1 megabyte line, which spikes to 97% during our nightly backups. We have a nightly backup to the RIC with all of our data. Best practice is to stay at or below 50% line capacity. So by increasing our line to 1 gigabyte, the district will experience a more consistent, smoother experience without any bottlenecking, even with its current infrastructure. Additionally, once we upgrade the infrastructure, we will utilize the full potential of that 1 gig bandwidth line. In addition, she also points out some information regarding the smart schools. The smart schools bond act states the district should have a minimum of 1 megabyte per second for each 1,000 students. By upgrading to a 1 gigabyte line, you're future-proofing your capacity to support and sustain your increased use of classroom technology such as Google Apps, Bring Your Own Device, BYOD, and the implementation of computer-based testing, which require increased bandwidth. Additionally, new federal and state initiatives over the next few years will continue to impact districts' reliance on technology as a method of delivering content and assessment for students. So, currently, since 2004, we've had 100 megs. We are interested in going up to a 1 gig to support what we have in district and what we are probably going to have to put on the network in the future.
And it's my understanding that it's cheaper to upgrade than what we were paying?
Right now, we're paying month to month
Okay.
because the contract did expire.
Okay.
So we're paying about $800 a month. If we were to upgrade, and that's for the 100 meg.
Okay.
If we upgrade to the 1 gig, it's, the numbers, it's like
Yeah,
700 something.
778.69, so it's
Yeah.
a
So
little bit
it's
less.
a
It's
little
gonna
bit
be
less
Plus minus, but.
than that 800. However, if we were going to renew a 3-year contract with the 100 meg that we currently have, then it would be less expensive.
I guess I'd like to see the data that shows and explains more how we are actually using the 100 meg. That the megabytes that they say that were 90% usage is what you said. I'd like to see some data on that. And I think that your IT committee should see that as well. I find that interesting that's even possible, knowing a different place and has a smaller, like say 50 megabytes, and they don't use the whole thing with the same type, especially since all of our students are on the internet at the same time. I also am interested in the fact that right now we're talking about a pipe, but we're also talking about the funnel that's going into it. So if our funnel is only funneling us so much, if we can get a bigger funnel, the pipe might actually make it feel like we're moving faster. So I think that we need a lot more data before we upgrade that piece of it. I think it might be more important to upgrade the systems in the building first before we upgrade the pipes. So I think that there's more information that we need. And so I think it's important that you and the technology committee and the RIC provide us with a little bit more data before we move forward with it.
Could you clarify what is the first thing that you wanted more information on?
The data that shows that we're using 90% of the 100 meg.
97 at 90. You said 97 when we're backing
90%
up.
of the 100 meg during the day, 97% at
At
night.
90.
during
And so
our backup.
I guess I'm interested to see if there's data that they can show us that shows that. Because again, I don't see that.
Robert?
If I may, in addition, the smart bond says that minimum of 100 megs, so.
Okay.
You know, from the financial, and if I can jump in, it's really not that much different from, it's Time Warner. It's really no different than if you have Time Warner at home. And you kind of lock in at a rate, you know, it's the old call them and, oh, we have another offer that it's the same thing, but or it's better, but it's cheaper moving forward. So it's really not that much different. So as long, we can pay it month by month in perpetuity. But this is an opportunity for 3 years to lock in at that price that's lower than, and as far as the, just to clarify, the RIC on our behalf communicates with Time Warner. So we don't have, I don't talk with Time Warner. They're handling Time Warner. I would imagine they have a better time than us residents do getting contact because they have a number of school districts that are being serviced through the RIC. But
Well, if we locked in at the lower,
in concept, I don't
doesn't,
think
it
it's
doesn't
that
make
much
any sense
different.
to lock in at the lower.
What's that?
It doesn't make any sense to lock in at the lower speed, at the lower bandwidth.
Well, no, except if you, as she said, if you lock in at the lower bandwidth, then the price is gonna go down too. What
Yeah.
we're paying now is a monthly bill. If we
Yeah.
lock in at the 1 meg, it's gonna be lower than locking in at the 1 gig.
It's 100
The question
meg.
is it needed? I mean, the conversation I've heard before is the bandwidth isn't our problem. We have bandwidth, it's how we get information to the bandwidth. That's the problem. I'm not an expert to know the difference.
Yeah,
But I
that's
think,
fine, we'll find
especially
out.
for a 3-year investment, it's something we need to know.
Yeah,
Where-
exactly.
Where is the problem? The funnel or the pipe, to use plumbing terms?
Well,
Not to-
I think,
I think that that's really important to get some of the data, especially since we have a technology committee and
Yeah.
since we're not in, if we can do this deal again in February, then we have a little bit of time to
Right.
talk about what is important and what is the most important thing right now. And
What's connected to what else,
And what,
you know?
like, what should we be fixing first? And there are reasons to fix one thing over the other, but then there's also reasons to do it the opposite way. So I really think that this is important for us to look into deeper.
I'm going to ask, Ms. Lobster had the expert from the RIC present the other day to the elementary and secondary committees. I think this board should get that presentation. Was that Maria Rocker?
Yes, it was.
Because they handle 56 districts and 4 BOCES. They handle MO BOCES. So as much as local capacity we have in terms of talent and ability, I don't know that we get higher up than the MORIC.
But she's the one who said
I
that
hear
the
you.
bandwidth we have is adequate. She, in those committee meetings, said that the bandwidth we have is adequate, which I think is why we're bringing up the question. If she comes to us and says,
100 megs is adequate.
what we have is adequate,
Well,
she's
It's
the
not
expert.
saying that we shouldn't do more, but.
We're going to have it, and not to worry, we'll have this.
Yeah, we can ask her.
And we'll ultimately get what I think will help us is a broader presentation from the RIC. And that'll keep us going forward.
So that could be next month.
Right, so we'll have to work that out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to our second opportunity for community participation. Mona, would you turn it on? Can you turn it, Travis? so we can-
Travis, let me quick. I just want to touch on something you suggested, Terry, about for general information for the public using nextdoor.com. I would avoid that like the plague. I think-
Not even to note that people are.
Well, it goes into 2 things. One, I think as a district, we need to funnel in the sources of information to the public. Because if we announce that one thing on there, for example, people might not hear about something else. Go, well, I didn't see it on Nextdoor. You know, if you're going to do something like that, you need to have a policy for where the information should be. Maybe it should be in the Mid-York. The other thing about that particular source of information is it is just good in theory, but I don't have to tell you guys if you know enough about it. It's just, you're going to get misinformation, you're going to create more problems by using that particular site than if you had just done it another way. I would just avoid it with the plague for all that stuff. There's other things, but time's short, so it's
Thank you, Travis.
Kathy Roy. I wanted to speak to the special education review. I'm an 8-year member of the middle school, high school RTI committee. So I kind of took a special interest when I saw that RTI was obviously included. And what I would like to do is bring to light some statements that are in the report that in my mind cast doubt on the validity of the entire review. First off, on page 22, it states progress monitoring for Hamilton is almost non-existent and is in an area of much needed improvement. What's important to note is that every 5 weeks, a core group from the middle school, high school RTI committee meet in order to monitor the student progress at the middle school, high school level. At this meeting, we're able to place students in the support area needed. It could be SLC, RTI math, or a reading class. For the past 4 years, I've created a spreadsheet that's shared with special education teachers, counselors, ELA teachers, and administration. The document includes my Fontes and Pinnell scores and now my NWEA scores. The results have assisted us in focusing the strategies that are working for our students in reading. On page 24, it states, it's highly recommended the district continues to move forward with the newly developed district RTI committee. The members of the RTI committee have not changed in the 8 years since its inception. This speaks to the dedication of the members and to the fact that it is not a new process. In 2009, Hamilton Central went above and beyond the state-mandated K-2 implementation to include K through 12. It should also be noted that HCS was so far out in front of the state mandate that in 2010, our RTI team presented to the Madison and Oneida BOCES superintendents regarding what the team had created in order to build a successful 6 through 12 RTI model. On page 26, it's recommended that the district develop consistent universal screening. Since 2008, the district benchmarks using Fontes and Pinnell 3 times per year. This is the universal screening used as required by the previous superintendent. Now we are also required to benchmark using NWEA 3 times per year. Lastly, on page 27, it states that we should transform study halls into intervention labs with software programs where students can engage in self-paced intervention activities. It's important to note that within the first 5 weeks of school, any student failing 2 or more class is moved into an RTI intervention program. Again, this could be the SLC room, RTI math, or reading. Unless we do not have a class available, which is a staffing issue, not a scheduling issue, as indicated in the report several times. The author's suggestion for improvement seemed to indicate a lack of knowledge in our district, leading me to wonder if we would be in this position now if someone had taken the time to ask some questions, but most importantly, learn the history of our RTI process.
Thank you.
Ooh, go ahead.
Keep calling us now.
I'm throwing this down except it's your voice.
Rick Hansen. I want to start first, I want to thank Fred for his kind words earlier. Special ed kind of took a beating today. And also, Mr. Lehman mentioned the districts that they compared us to. The average enrollment was 3,056 students in those districts, compared to our 500 or so students. Hyde Park, South Colony, Schodack, East Greenbush, and Union Springs. They also didn't observe the students in the classroom and didn't survey the parents. I think the excuse was that it was June. As far as I know, those are work days to me, and we're still hard at it. And I just don't know where these folks were, and I'm really dissatisfied with the survey. And I just wanted to make sure. I know you mentioned these things already, but these were the items that I wanted to speak to. And this RTI program, takes place across the hall from me, and I grind my teeth looking across the hall, and that meeting's going until 4 and after 4 in the afternoon, when contractually these teachers can leave at 3:15, and I'm a kind of stickler for that. And I see them over there addressing those issues well into the afternoon, so, okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just, now that the core team is out, I've been asked several times today, I'm concerned about the lack of diversity on the core team. I think Dr. Olson already knows what I'm referring to, but I haven't spoken with you directly, so maybe I'm incorrect. But of the 26 members of the team, 9 work for Colgate, one more is a Colgate spouse. 12 of the 26 are members of our HCS employees, another spouse of a current HCS board member, another a former HCS board member, and 2 teachers that work at Sherburne Earlville. When I look at the survey that people, or the form that people were asked to complete, it asks, do you own or run a business in this community? If yes, indicate below. Do you work for a large community partner organization? For example, Colgate Community Memorial Hospital. I think that is off-putting. I think that it disinvites persons who just work as employees in organizations. I think that it's my understanding that there was some outreach, direct outreach to people asking them to be participants. And if that's the case, I hope that people from all sectors of our community were asked. I hope that our farming community was asked. I hope that the Hamilton Initiative was asked. I hope that PCD was asked. I hope that persons who, as I say, who don't own businesses but work. I hope that retirees were asked. I hope that the Rotary was asked. It strikes me that we can, that something as critical as this strategic plan, we need a more diverse and representative group than a group that's dominated so heavily by ourselves and Colgate. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have motions to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Thank you for coming.